planning process. I also want to provide a framework which makes it easier for them to participate. It is my sincere belief that this process begins with us as advisors who can change our behavior towards women. So why is this important to me? Although it has been over 5 years since my dad, Wilmot, died, I still remember hearing my mom on the phone with our family's life insurance agent, Tom Flanoy, who some of you may know. She was on the phone a few days after his death, and she asked him, "Tom, do I have any money?" She honestly didn't know. And she's not an aberration. My mom belonged to a large sorority of women who had not participated in the family investment decisions and the estate planning process. My mom's defense, however, she chose to bury her head in the sand. After all, my dad was a residential developer and home builder. She got tired of the ups and downs of his business, but with her head in the sand, she ended up being woefully unprepared for dealing with the business side of his death. It took 18 hard months before I started hearing joy back in my mom's voice, and she is by nature a joyful person. Part of the reason is that it took about 18 months to settle my dad's estate for my mom to connect with a financial planner who provided her with a clear financial plan. It was an 18-month struggle, even though she had a lawyer for her daughter helping her every step of the way, and another daughter who made sure she never had to eat dinner alone. And most women don't have that kind of support system. In my legal practice, I've seen that women are not participating in the financial and estate planning process until they get crushed by an unexpected life event and are forced to participate. This isn't just women of my mom's generation. This generation is continuing in my generation and those younger. So the heartbreak of losing my dad and helping my mom with the aftermath delivered to me my purpose. Find a way to engage women in the financial and estate planning process before tragedy strikes. So why should this matter to you? Let me give you some hard facts. 80% of men die married, 80% of women die single. Widows outlive their husbands by an average of 14 years. 50% of marriages end in divorce. Women business owners account for more than 8.6 million businesses and control more than $14 million in assets. Most likely, a woman will be the family's primary financial decision maker at some point in her life if she is not already. Therefore, at some point, a woman will be your client. Why are women not participating? Before I could come up with a framework of trying to make it easier for women to participate, I had to understand why they're not participating. One of the reasons is that today millions of women must play more roles in their lives than ever before. Boss, coworker, employee, volunteer, daughter, wife, mother, friend. Since virtual school started for my kids, I've added Zoom tech, room service attendant, and lunch lady to my roles. Women are more likely to keep the family calendar, plan kids' chores, school activities, oversee schoolwork, make the doctor's appointments, plan dinner, drive carpools, arrange social events. Numerous studies have shown that regardless of whether women work part-time or full-time or entirely in the home, women do far more housework than men, take more responsibility for caring for children, and have far less leisure time than their spouses. In her book, Untamed, Glennon Doyle describes women's lives as follows. We strive so mightily to be good partners, daughters, mothers, employees, and friends. We hope all this striving will make us feel alive. Instead, it leaves us feeling weary, stuck, overwhelmed, and underwhelmed. Given all the roles that women have to play and the day-to-day decisions they have to make, women don't have the time or the bandwidth to take on financial and estate planning decisions. Another reason is that men are still socialized to believe that their primary family obligation is to be the breadwinner and make the major family decisions. Women, on the other hand, are socialized that their primary family obligation is to be the family's primary caregiver. A recent New York Life Investments research study found that 39% of female breadwinners would prefer that the roles were reversed with their spouse, which means that their roles as the primary breadwinners are not in congruence with their beliefs and social conditioning that their spouse should be the primary breadwinner and they should be the primary caregiver. As the primary caregivers, women tend to yield to their husbands, the primary breadwinners, on financial and estate planning decisions. Despite some improvement in the last few decades, financial and estate planning is still a male-dominated industry. In fact, approximately 85% of financial advisors are men. For the most part, women's social and professional circles are not in the financial services sector. As a result, women have smaller professional information sharing networks and lack the necessary info to make financial decisions. In light of this, women don't speak the language or feel like they have an understanding of the complexities. Recently, I was casually talking to a female friend of mine about refinancing my home. I explained we were combining a fixed mortgage and an equity line into a jumbo interest-only arm since the interest rates are so low. A week or so later, that same friend called me up and asked me for some names of financial planners. She confessed to me that she had no idea that refinancing to an interest-only payment was something you could do. Her husband had always controlled the home financing. She had never even thought about it. But now she was on the precipice of a divorce, and she needed to understand her options if she wanted to stay in her home. With small information sharing networks and a lack of financial literacy, the majority of women avoid the financial and estate planning process altogether. Whether at the conference room table at the office or the dinner table at home, women are less likely to speak up, and when they do, they are more likely to be interrupted than men. Even in the Supreme Court, female justices are at a disadvantage when it comes to speaking up. During oral arguments, they are disproportionately interrupted by the male justices and other male lawyers, despite the fact procedural rules prohibit a lawyer from interrupting a justice. In 2015, for example, over 65% of all interruptions during proceedings were directed at Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan, the female justices on the bench. Ask yourself, how many times have you been in a meeting with a married couple where the wife quietly sits there politely nodding? Just recently, I met a prospective couple in their 70s on Zoom. The man was in front of the camera talking to me. His wife was somewhere behind him, out of the view of the camera lens. I could not see her. Any questions I asked, he answered them. In this case, she was only not heard, she wasn't seen. I've also had situations where I've just spoken to the husband on the phone or via email and have not met the wife until the actual will signing. Women do not ask for what they want or deserve. Women's reluctance is based on societal conditioning. Gender social standards require women to behave modestly and unselfishly and avoid promoting their own self-interest. Women see asking what she wants and needs as masculine behavior. Women are taught to be kind, be compassionate, be considerate, be generous. And while those are admirable traits, women worry about the backlash of men and women of being too assertive or confident. They are taught to watch and wait and accept whatever comes their way, and in most cases, women leave the asking to men. Until quite recently, women were taught that they needed to wait for a man to ask them on a date or marry them. Some of you may remember the self-help book, The Rules, Time-Tested Secrets for Capturing the Heart of Mr. Right by Ellen Fine and Sherry Schneider, originally published in 1995. The book suggests rules that a woman should follow in order to attract and marry the man of her dreams. These rules include that a woman should be easy to be with, but hard to get. In other words, don't ask, don't be demanding. But what is the problem when a woman doesn't ask? She doesn't receive. Women have an external locus of control while men have an internal locus of control. Children observe that much of the world is controlled by men and therefore incorporate this information into their own gender schemes. When both parents are in the car, the father drives more than the mother, suggesting that men are in the driver's seat and control the family's movement and safety. Men rarely change their names at marriage, but many women do, and children are given their father's name, and by extension, their collective identity. Even if a woman makes more money than the man, when the family eats out, the man will typically pay the bill. Therefore, little girls grow up into women who think that money is something controlled by other people, not themselves. So what happens when women don't participate in the financial and estate planning process? Well, first, they may run out of money. When they haven't been engaged, they have no vocabulary or understanding of financial products, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, annuities, trust, yields, dividends, universal life insurance mean nothing to them. With this lack of understanding, women tend to be more risk averse with their investments than men, and this leads to their investment portfolios not generating enough income. Women who devote themselves full-time or part-time to raising their children suffer from loss of income. Rather than being paid to do this incredibly demanding work of creating human capital, women pay with lost earnings and missed opportunities. When women do return to the workforce, they have no idea of their worth and accept lower salaries without even negotiating them. All of this compounds over time, leaving women with a radically diminished financial security. Women may also subject themselves to unnecessary financial liability. I've had at least 5 female clients and friends in the last few years who have been subjected to unnecessary income tax liability because they filed joint returns with their husbands who had not paid self-employment taxes or took aggressive deductions. If they had known of these issues, they could have protected themselves and filed separate returns. A woman's lack of preparation and understanding can also lead to the woman being taken advantage of with high fees or with purchasing financial products she doesn't need. When a woman becomes elderly without proper estate planning, she can be subject to elder abuse. I saw one situation where a man convinced his elderly girlfriend into signing a power of attorney, naming him his agent. When she died, he didn't notify the bank of her death and drained her bank account. And then finally, women get blindsided by death, divorce, or disability. For example, a woman's standard of living falls by 73% on average after a divorce, while a man's rises by 42%. And finally, making such high stakes choices regarding financial and estate planning while a woman is grieving over the loss of a spouse, dealing with a parent with Alzheimer's, or fighting with an ex in courts is extremely difficult. So now that we have an understanding of why women are not participating in the financial and estate planning process, and the negative consequences when they do not, we now want to focus on how we get them to engage. Please know that we are not looking to shame women or dramatically change their behavior. When women feel that they need to change their behavior or act in a way that feels inconsistent with who they are, this tends to ramp up the anxiety, not lessen it. So our goal is to provide a framework and a comfortable atmosphere where women can speak their own language. Therefore, we must change our language and our approach. So the framework is to have women think of financial and estate planning as a blueprint for designing her life. Blueprint is broken down into 3 main steps: dream, design, build. So why 3 steps? Crafting a financial and estate plan sounds daunting on its face. Every big job is simpler when you break it down into steps. It's like the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. We use the analogy of designing and building a house for a variety of reasons. First of all, my family business was home building, so it's what I know. Secondly, financial and estate planning is a lot like building or remodeling a house. First, you envision your dream home, just like you might envision the life you want. Secondly, you then create a budget, just like you get an understanding of your finances. And finally, you hire the right team to design and build the house, just like you would hire the right team to craft your financial and estate plan. Third, the symbolism of building a house is associated with sheltering and protecting you from the outside world, just like your financial and estate plan protects you from life's unexpected events. And lastly, for most women, designing, building, remodeling a house, or even envisioning doing so is something most have done and can relate to. As financial and estate planners, most of us are well equipped with steps 2 and 3. We are good at supplying data, opinions, facts, resources, or answers to questions. We can plug in numbers, generate fancy illustrations, and draft documents. To engage women in this process, however, we as advisors must be equipped to help women with step 1, dream. This is where the magic happens and where you will build a relationship with your female client. You may have a female client who is in a similar position as Alice in Lewis Carroll's Alice Adventures in Wonderland, who, when coming to a fork in the road, asked the Cheshire Cat, would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? Cat, that depends a good deal on where you want to go. Alice, I don't much care where. Cat, it doesn't really much matter. It doesn't matter which way you go. How do you get a woman who has spent a lifetime thinking about everyone else, who feels overwhelmed and underwhelmed at the same time, who does not speak up or ask for what she wants, to know what she wants and how to ask for it? It's not easy. Take my client, Evelyn, for example. Evelyn's a doctor who had a successful practice for decades. She's married. In her late 50s, she came to me to review her estate planning documents. For years, her husband, Kenny, an attorney, had driven this process. And she and Kenny were now in the process of updating their documents. And not surprisingly, Evelyn had questions. But this accomplished, highly educated woman felt embarrassed by her questions. She didn't feel comfortable asking Kenny or the attorney chosen by Kenny what she thought might be stupid questions. When Evelyn and I talked, one of the first questions I asked was, well, what do you want to happen? She looked a little shell-shocked and told me simply, no one had ever asked her that question. Not her husband, not his attorney, not their financial advisor. But after a lifetime of ignoring the question, how does a woman figure out what she wants? Here's a mental exercise you can use with your female clients to try to get an answer. You might want to even take some time and do it yourself right now. Close your eyes and do the following. Imagine everything gets wiped clean. You inherit no tasks or responsibilities from your past or present. You have no one to answer to account for, nothing to take care of, to see to. You can let it all go, all of it. All clean? Good. Now add back only what you miss. It's much easier to add to a clean slate than remove from a full plate. It's important for women to understand that planning is not about sacrifice, it's about intention and priorities. Another way to engage women and try to figure out what is important to them is to ask open-ended or deep discovery questions. Back in February, we had women in our audience partner up and ask each other these questions. In our comments and feedback, this was by far their favorite part of our presentation. So here are some examples. Under the category of lifestyle, are you living the way you want to be living? If you could add one thing to your lifestyle that would get you closer to how you want to be living, what would it be? What does wealth give you the freedom to do? What do you wish it could allow you to do? Under philanthropy, how does giving represent values for you and your family? What is important for you to accomplish with your philanthropy? Under risk, give me an example of a time you got uncomfortable because of the risk involved. Tell me about the biggest loss you've experienced. What's the biggest financial loss you've had? What are your biggest fears and concerns? How do these influence your life? Under legacy, what do you want to be remembered for? If your children's children could read your story, what would it say? Who or what was the greatest influence on you in developing your principles? What are your principles? What did you learn from your parents? What do you wish you could have learned? What do you want to pass on to future generations? Under dreams, what's the thing you've always wanted to do, but you've never got a chance to do? If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing? When you were younger, what did you think you'd be doing now? What do you think you have the ability and skill to do, but you're holding back from doing it? Under education, tell me about the most important thing education provided for you. What role does education play for future generations? If you could be an expert in something, what would it be? How are you going about educating your children, grandchildren on your wealth? And finally, the next phase. What is the next big thing in your life? And the thing after that? Describe the emotion you feel when you think about the next big phase. How do you picture the next phase? What is important for you to accomplish in the next phase of your life? Once women engage in this exercise, you and they may see a pattern start to emerge of what is important to them and what they want to do. When I did this exercise myself, the following priorities came into focus for me: education, risk, legacy, purpose. My first priority is getting my kids educated and figuring out a way to pay for it. In 1992, my parents paid just under $14,000 a year in tuition for me to attend Washington University. Today, I would pay well up into close to $70,000 to send my son Colin there. That is an increase of over 300%, and incomes have not risen by that same amount. Multiply that cost for all three of my kids, and the numbers are nothing short of terrifying. Next, I chose risk because my husband Joe and I are at a point in our lives where both incomes pay the bills. Losing one income due to death or disability would put tremendous financial strain on our household. And lastly, I chose legacy, purpose. My dad's death and helping my mom with the aftermath transformed me. In the years since, I have found a healing process that gives meaning to my own life and offers me an opportunity to use what I have learned to help others, and especially women. Once my kids finish college, my husband Joe and I approach retirement age, I suspect that my top two priorities will change. But asking our female clients deep questions is not enough. We must actively listen to them. What is active listening? It is listening with more than just your ears. 80% of communication takes place non-verbally. While this is much harder with face masks and Zoom meetings, there are still some steps we can take to actively listen. With our bodies, we can maintain eye contact. We can nod. We can not move around and be distracted. We can encourage verbalizations from our clients. We can mirror body postures and language. We can lean forward. We can take notes. On the verbal side, first and foremost, do not interrupt. There's no need to be Mr. Informative and talk over our clients. Show empathy. Doug Duncan, when I first started working, told me, no one cares how much you know till they know how much you care. So by doing so, you need to show warmth, non-judgmental reactions, reflect back what the client's saying to you to make sure you're understanding them. Use humor, as that sort of eases people's anxiety. And ultimately, you must show your female clients respect, which I define as follows. The ability to communicate to your client that it is your sincere belief that your client possesses the inherent strength and capacity to make it in life, and that she has the right to choose her own alternatives and make her own decisions. Now we're on to step 2, design. Every architect or designer knows there's a critical step between vision and reality. The next step of the blueprint is to design financial plans to fund the client's dreams. Before women can turn their dreams into a reality, you must help them understand their numbers. I can't tell you how many female friends, family members, clients tell me they haven't looked at a tax return in years, they don't know who's on the title of their house, or whether their bank accounts are jointly held. It is important that a female client go through the exercise of determining what she and her spouse own and what their liabilities are. So you can ask your female clients to open the mail and obtain access to online accounts and look at tax returns, bank statements, brokerage statements, mortgage statements, credit card statements. Next, a woman must determine how much she earns and how much she spends. And unfortunately, determining how much she spends is like stepping on the scale after the holidays. No one really wants to look at it. But we advise clients the best place to start is with the annual statements on the credit card, since most people charge everyday items on their credit card. So why is this important? It is important for women to understand the concept that the definition of rich is having passive income greater than their burn. A woman who has $40,000 of income and $30,000 of expenses is technically rich, while a woman who has $500,000 of annual income but spends $600,000 a year is not rich. Here are some examples that we use in our presentation to show the concept of a burn rate. So let's meet Allison and Carol. Allison is a 55-year-old divorcee. She hasn't worked since she started having kids about 30 years ago. After her divorce, she ended up with about $10 million in assets. Since Allison does not work, her $10 million portfolio must support her pretty extravagant lifestyle right now. $10 million sounds like a lot, but it isn't if she is spending $60,000 a month or $720,000 a year. So given a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, the bad news must be delivered to Allison that she can only withdraw about $250,000 a year and not run out of money. Next, let's meet Carol. Carol is a widow at age 70. She inherited $5 million from her late husband. Her life expectancy is around 95 years old, and Carol wants to make sure she can leave some of her estate to her children and grandchildren. Carol doesn't spend nearly as much as Allison. She'll be able to support her lifestyle and leave her kids about $3 million when she is 95 years old. So ultimately, it's important for women to understand the financial variables that they can control and the variables they can't control. The variables they can control: spending, how much debt she takes on, asset allocation. Variables she can't control: when she or her spouse dies, in the stock market. Just like building a house, financial and estate planning is not something a woman must do alone. She gets a designer, an architect, a builder. She gets a team. Same goes for financial and estate planning. Advise your female clients to put together a team of trusted advisors. Typically, a woman's team should include an estate planning attorney, a financial planner, an accountant, and a life insurance professional. It is important to build on a woman's strength of collaboration, and having a team of advisors does that. Once a woman has designed a financial plan to fulfill her dreams, it's time to build the house to protect her dreams and assets. This is where I come in. Ironically, like my dad, I am the builder. Every woman, regardless of age or marital status, needs a will, general power of attorney, and advanced healthcare directive. Given her unique circumstances, she may need more advanced estate planning tools, such as trusts. Obviously, the first question you would ask your female client is, do you have the basic package: a will, a power of attorney, and advanced healthcare directive? So recently, I had a widow client assume incorrectly that she and her spouse didn't need wills because she had assumed that everything went to her if something happened to her husband. And that is not true under Georgia law. Spouses and children are equal heirs. In this case, my client and her adult daughter had an equal percentage of ownership in her late husband's probate assets. We had to go to court and file a petition for your support to transfer title to her. In this situation, the adult daughter consented to the petition and everything turned out okay. But let's change the facts. Suppose the daughter is a stepdaughter from a previous marriage. While both women are grieving and emotions are running high, they may end up fighting about the distribution of her husband's estate. So even if your client tells you, oh yeah, I had the basic package, I'm totally fine, there's some follow-up questions you should ask them. One is, when was the last time you updated them? I get asked all the time how often you should update your estate planning documents. The short answer is when laws change or lives change, and both change all the time. For example, when my husband Joe and I had our first son Colin, like most folks, we prepared wills that created trust for our children with mandatory distributions starting at age 25. While I had high hopes for baby Colin, I now live in the reality of 18-year-old Colin, and that 25-year-old age doesn't seem so smart. Or you may be like my mom, who once told me that she now knew the reason she had children was to have grandchildren, and she never thought I was this cute. My mom wanted to make sure that there was money left for her grandchildren. Also, we've had significant tax law changes in the last few years, and we'll continue to have tax law changes. So it's very important that women keep these documents updated, especially after divorce and death of a spouse. The final and most crucial question to ask your clients is, do you understand them? Have the client explain them to you? I've had clients surprised that all of her husband's assets went to a trust for her and her adult children. Or the will names a corporate trustee or a trustee the family no longer has a relationship with to manage the assets for the surviving wife. Ultimately, a woman's blueprint will help a woman build before she has to. She'll build knowledge before she has to, build strength before she has to, build an emergency fund before she has to. My dad began our holiday dinners with the following toast: an armored car never follows a hearse. My dad knew what to be true, that in the end, what matters most in our lives is not money, but family and friends, and ultimately love. Most folks have a misconception that financial estate planning is all about money and that we purchase life insurance, execute wills, trust, etc., to protect our assets and save on taxes. While that may be partially true, that's not the main reason we do it. The main reason is love. We love our children, our siblings, our parents, our nieces and nephews, our friends. We want what is best for them while we are living on this earth and after. Ultimately, women will engage in this process out of love. I hope that the tools I've shared in this presentation will strengthen your representation of female clients. Mainly, I hope you leave here today knowing that we as advisors can help women improve their circumstances and ultimately increase their happiness. Please let me know if anyone has any questions. I would greatly appreciate any feedback or comments you may have. I would love to hear your success stories. So please feel free to email me or call me anytime. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Get Monica. Tom, I think you're on mute. There we go.
Thank you, Stacy. I don't see any questions at this point. I appreciate that information. I encourage anyone to reach out to Stacy if they do have any questions or follow up or to tell their story. Again, very important topic, and hopefully, we'll go forward and some people will be reaching out to you. So I really appreciate you presenting today, Stacy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I guess I gave everybody a little more time to their day since we finished early. So again, thank you so much for having me. And I hope this is informative. And again, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. And thanks again for having me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for participating. This will end our conference. Thank you.